Are you a CrossFit coach or maybe a box owner looking to learn more about nutrition? You want to help support the athletes that come to your box. Maybe you have some one-on-one clients. And we all know nutrition is the foundation. We all talk about the theoretical hierarchy of the development of a athlete. And nutrition is at the base. It's like building a house. You can't build the attic first. You can't worry about performance in sport without working on the foundation. And that's what nutrition is. So maybe you're a coach, maybe you're a box owner, maybe you're just an athlete looking to potentially earn a little more income, develop a new income stream as a nutrition coach. Well, you could check out the Own Your Eating certificate course. We review fundamental nutrition principles as well as teaching you how to implement flexible eating, that's macro counting, and assist others with their tracking of macros. The cool thing about it is you're going to learn so much for yourself. Even if you didn't want to coach anyone else, but you simply wanted to learn more about tracking macros, you will get so much out of this course. It'll be the last thing you ever have to read, study, purchase because you're going to get so much information, as well as sharing nutrition experience with you. Own Your Eating will also teach you how to coach others so that you can really make a difference with the people in your community and your lives. Maybe you need to finally get your mom to track macros. Maybe it's your best friend. Maybe you put on the quarantine 15 and you're looking to just lose a few lbs, a few pounds yourself. This will teach you all of that. And the cool thing about macros, the cool thing about the way in which we at Own Your Eating teach you is it's really sustainable. The business setup and marketing strategies are also included. So if you do really want to make this a side deal or a side hustle, you'll have all the tools you'll ever need to do. And in addition to that, if you're a level 3 CrossFit coach, you can earn CEUs to help you revalidate. And we also give CEUs for NASM as well as AFA. So you can check that out. For me, every few years, I need to re-up my L4, no big deal, L4 coach, but this will help you do it. So if you're interested in learning more about the Own Your Eating certificate course, you can go to courses.ownyoureating.com. Or if you just go to ownyoureating.com, right up in the header there, it says Become a Coach. You can click on that. And with the code BEST HOUR, that's BESTHOUR, BEST HOUR, you'll get 15% off. Go check it out now. I was the one, along with Roz, who helped put this all together. So I really understand that if you have questions for me about it, of course you can reach out. But I really believe in it. I've put hundreds of people through this course. It's the way I learned how to track macros. It's the way I've been tracking macros for over 5 years, and I think you will absolutely love it. So go check it out again, courses.ownyoureating.com, and use that code BESTHOUR for 15% off.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Best hour of their day. Fern, Todd. How you been, man?
Been good.
I feel like we haven't talked in a while. I miss you.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks, dude. Just down here sweating in Florida. Staying
How hot
warm.
is it down there?
It's hot.
Hundreds?
I don't think it touches 100, but it's high 90s with,
100,
80,
158,
90%
humidity.
Yeah, so it's hot.
You basically have to be a fish to survive there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, but it's good.
When was your last seminar?
I didn't work this last weekend, but the weekend before that.
Where were we at?
Orlando.
You basically haven't left Florida since we started back up, have you?
No, I've been all around the state. Jacksonville a couple times, Orlando a couple times, Tampa a couple times. So it's been good.
All right. So on that note, so today we're going to talk about feedback, both getting feedback and giving feedback. So my question for you is how long did you go without doing a seminar? Let me ask you that. Like 4 months, 3 months?
I can look and see. My last one was the 14th and 15th of March. And then I went again the 30th of May. So March, April,
2.5 months.
Yeah, something like that.
2.5 months. Okay. So we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but everybody gets feedback over the course of the weekend, meaning the red shirts. Obviously, the participants get a lot of feedback, but red shirts both give and get feedback. So how was it giving feedback? And then did you get any feedback your first weekend back?
Yeah, given feedback, it's always, my approach to giving feedback is first to get a feel for the trainer, the person I'm giving feedback to, just to see what their thoughts are. Because a lot of times I think people that are self-aware, and most people that have, done pretty well in their careers or whatever, have to be fairly self-aware. Most of the time they kind of feel where they were strong and where they're weak. And a lot of time that just leads to a discussion where they already know where they've got an opportunity. And then it can just be a constructive conversation about, here's some ideas on how to improve that. So it doesn't even have to come across as like, here's what you did wrong or any of that kind of thing. So my approach is always, trying to ask questions, get a feel for what they thought of the weekend, where they thought they were strong or where there were some opportunities, and then go from there. After 2.5 months, I think most of the trainers, myself included, were a little rusty.
Yep.
So getting back, and so it was discussions. I think a lot of it was discussions on, this is what felt weird. Not only was I rusty, but also there's a whole new environment that we're training in with post-COVID protocols and trying to keep everybody safe and comfortable and all that kind of stuff. So it turned into really kind of an open discussion on strategies to stay sharp, even when you've gone a prolonged period without doing your role, whether that's giving presentations, whether that's coaching in person, whatever that is. And then some open dialogue around how to approach this new environment going forward. So it was a good experience. Yeah, it was cool.
I think the natural progression for a lot of that is as you have anybody who becomes more competent at their craft, the feedback obviously changes and turns into a little bit more of discussion where it might be asking for advice on something very specific or something like that. But that's typically not how it starts. It typically starts a little bit more rough, I guess, a little bit more direct. And I think that's pretty standard. I know a lot of the feedback discussions I have are more topics about like how to do something, or like, how do you want to massage this lecture topic, or how do you maybe want to change, like for level 2s, for instance, like how are we going to try something unique with one of the teach backs or something like that? Like, are you going to run this group a little bit differently? But what were some of the ways you've gotten it wrong, either in the gym giving feedback or even as a flow when you first started giving feedback?
I think one of the things for me as a person getting feedback, I'm kind of less concerned with the things I did well, and I'm more interested in just, hey, what can I do to get better, or what did I mess up, or any of that kind of stuff. And so I'm usually asking for that and looking for that. And so thinking that, that's the way that I am, I took the assumption that other people were the same as me. And so a lot of times my feedback strictly related to stuff that people could do better, without the praise and the attaboys on the things that they're already doing well. And so I think where I've gone wrong with that is just pointing out the bad things. And like, I jump in as an owner, I jump in one of our classes, our coach coaches a great class, and the class just finishes and I don't say anything. Whereas the next class I jump in, they do something that I think they can do better. And then at the end of class, I tell them what they can do better. Whereas now what I try to do when I'm in a class and it's a good class, I try to make sure I point that out. So that way, every time I come to them, they don't have the fear of like, oh crap, here comes Todd. He's going to tell me what I did wrong. It's trying to be a little bit better at pointing out the things they're doing well. So I think that's one of the things that I've struggled with and worked on, given both the positive and the negative side of things.
I think that's pretty common, and I was the same way too. And I kind of made that same mistake. And so now what I do, so if I'm just even sitting off to the side and somebody's doing something well, like even if I have like some negative feedback, I'll probably just table that not negative feedback, for constructive feedback. I'll probably just table that right there on the spot and then just say, hey, that was a great class. Like, nice job. Like, yes, we could do some things different. Like, we could all improve everything that we do. But sometimes I think it's wholly appropriate to just say, good fucking job. Like, that was good. you know, and particularly if you have been hard in the past, I think it becomes more important. Like if you've been the type of person to give like pretty harsh feedback and have high standards, then I think those attaboys and those like, hey, that was great. That was a 27 person class. You crushed it. Everybody was engaged. Those can go a long way. And I've seen the reaction for people when you do that for them. They're like, the confidence level just goes up, you know?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you think have you ever evaluated your either like your response or things like getting feedback? Like I know I've gotten better at getting feedback, but if that sounds weird, but
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the person I'm getting feedback, my approach to getting feedback was greatly dictated by the person I was getting it from. So there's, I've, playing sports throughout my life, or, having various teachers and leaders and stuff like that. There's certain leaders that you respect and you look at what they do, and, you believe that they're strong at their trade, whatever it is. And so it's like, I'm open and eager to hear their feedback. And then there's other people that for whatever reason, I didn't have that same respect for. And so then it was harder it was harder for me to stomach feedback. And so the reality of it is any opportunity to be around anybody in any scenario, you've got an opportunity to learn and get better. And it took me a long time to kind of figure that out. So I've had to grow and evolve on taking the feedback for what it is, no matter who it is giving it, because it's obviously something that they saw, and it's something that I can get better at. It's that kind of like perception is reality thing. Even if maybe I don't agree with it right off the bat, it's coming from for some reason it's being delivered to you. So you better at least take it on board and see what you can do with it, because we can all get better from a little bit of everything.
I used to be awful at, and now I wouldn't even say I'm good at it. I probably just learned to internalize it better, but I used to be awful at getting feedback from members.
Yeah.
Man, I used to be the most defensive person on earth about people, anything. They're like, I don't like this coach, or the bathrooms are dirty. And I'd be like, well, I just immediately was on the defensive and had like an excuse for why the thing was the way it was, whatever their feedback was. And I could probably safely say that none of those people are still here, and that's probably my fault.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the same thing. Is like, we're so passionate. You can get so tied up and passionate about what you're doing, and convinced that your perspective is the right one. So however you're doing it is for a reason, and it's obviously correct in your eyes. And so I think it's easy to be defensive towards that and have that same approach, but God, is it not productive, huh?
Oh no, it's actually the exact opposite. You're compounding what is actually probably a pretty solvable problem, and you're very quickly making it unsolvable by simply just not listening.
Right. So how have you gotten better at that, and what have you done anything to try and to onboard more feedback, or to promote people giving you more feedback?
So the first thing I did was I just started asking people for it all the time. And I just had to like tell myself, it doesn't matter what it is, good, bad, or indifferent. I just convinced myself that everybody had negative feedback, and I was just prepared for it. So I would just go out of my way to ask people how things are going. Do you have any feedback for me? And at first, and this is probably for everybody, if you're like me and you have been super defensive about it over time, as you're going through this, nobody's going to give you any feedback. So you have to commit to the process of continuing to beat people over the head with the fact that you want feedback. And then they'll slowly start doing it. And the initial feedback probably won't be good. So you're gonna put in all this time and effort to get feedback to get something that's not good. So I think if you just are okay with that process, then you can start to get that. So now I think it comes pretty free flowing. And then the second thing to just try to, I don't know, maybe play psychological games with myself is assume that only 1% of the feedback is legit, right? So good or bad, right? So if it's bad feedback, assume that only 1% of about that is accurate and good. So so 99% of what's going on is okay. And if it's good feedback, just assume that 99% of it is still just okay, and it's only 1% for this one person. So by doing that, I reduced the magnitude of the feedback to me, because instead of thinking like everything about this is bad and it's 100% a shitty scenario, I was like 1%. And it just allowed me to take it on board and deal with it. It might not be 1%, but that's just how I did. Like, it was just a little psychological. I'm like, 1% of what this person is telling me is accurate and legitimate, but I need to deal with that 1%.
Right.
And it's usually probably more than that, but that's how I did it. That was just the game I play with myself. And it just allowed me to take it on board, because I was like, it's only 1%. Like, instead of, thinking that like everything that I do sucks.
Yeah.
That can be hard after a while. So, and it's worked, and I'm far more open to it now. And a lot of times now the feedback is like really, it's not even like feedback. Like, what I get now is just a lot of ideas. You guys should do this. And I'm like, we should do that. Like, that's great. I'm going to do that now. Like
Yeah.
things we put in the bathroom, like you should put a little, like, just like random stuff that like just would never cross my mind. And then I start to do it, and then suddenly you start to get more feedback on more things.
Yeah, I think it's a cool cycle once you're open to it, and the more you hear, and then acting upon it too. I think that's a big thing. Is we try to do surveys at least once a year, and it's like whatever people say, we want to make a point to not only do it, but then also prove to people we're listening. Because nothing's worse than going, "Hey, give me feedback," and somebody gives it to you, and you're like,
Nothing happens.
"Yeah, nothing happens." Now, there are times where it's like people give me feedback, and it's like, "Well, we intentionally do something this way, so we're not going to change it to do this other way." But I still can appreciate that. And oh, by the way, this other thing you told me about, I am going to implement.
Yeah. Or maybe I won't implement exactly what you did, but maybe it's a variation of what you suggested, because you may not have full context on like why that idea wouldn't work. But like, we can do something like along those lines. So a compromise in a lot of those situations is still a win.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think another thing that's helped me to get more feedback is a lot of times kind of as a leader, as the gym owner, or as flow master at a seminar, is don't just open-endedly ask for feedback, but kind of direct it. Because, at the end of a weekend when I'm like, "Hey, what do you have for me?" Most of the time people are like,
Nothing.
"I don't have anything, I'm good." So, to
You're
get
in
a
charge,
little bit
dude.
of,
I don't have anything for you.
Yeah, exactly. So to get something out of them, it's like, "Hey, what do you think about the way I did this one particular thing? Set up the board or set up the classroom. I didn't feel good about this portion of it. Did you think that came off awkward? How would you have done it?" And then, it starts that dialogue, and then it also, hopefully shows them that I'm true and honest in the fact that I want feedback, and I don't think I do everything perfectly. So here's some things that I don't think I'm doing very well. What's your thoughts? And then a lot of times that'll kind of like jumpstart the idea session, and then it's like, okay, well, actually, by the way, there was a couple other things I saw too, and it's like, cool.
Yeah, it's got to open that door.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like at the level 1 in like in an active classroom, or even at the level 2, asking that horrific question of, what do you guys see?
Yeah. Nothing. My heart's beating so fast because I don't want to be pulled in the middle. I don't see anything. Right? It's like, holy crap.
Or it goes so off track from what you want, the discussion that you wanted to have. Like I wanted everybody to see hip extension, and somebody is like, "Well, I think
they're looking
you
up.
might have a shoulder mobility issue."
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
He's looking right at the ground. I think that's the problem. It's like, well, he is looking at the ground, but I don't think that's the problem.
You're not wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I think a little more guidance on that. Being specific what you want, when you're giving somebody feedback, being specific on what direction you're going to take this thing, and then when you're asking for it, same deal.
How often do you give your coaches currently? Do you give them feedback? Not that much.
It kind of varies. Yeah. At this point, we've got most of our coaching staff has been here for, 3 to 5 to 7 years. We've got one newer coach that is getting a lot of feedback and more feedback, and the other ones it's a little less it's a little less often on their actual classes and coaching. If there's something I notice, then it'll jump out, whether good or bad. And it's more so on bringing them into the fold to get ideas for things outside of just regular classes. In fact, I just took our noon class and I'm like, man, we run good classes. So what else can we do beyond that? It's like the X's and O's of running a general warm-up, a specific warm-up. I mean, our coaches coach the crap out of people. Our athletes move really, really well. I'm super happy with that. So then it's like, well, what can we do beyond this? Because we've gotten pretty good at that. And there's always little things that you can continue to evolve and improve on. But beyond this, what else can we do?
So did you come up with anything?
Well, that was just as I was in class during this.
Yeah.
And so it was more so like, we're going to have a meeting with like our main coaches later this week, just to talk about different things, get some ideas from them and some buy-in on some other ideas and things we're talking about implementing going forward. So I think it's kind of turned to the approach to where it's less of I'm the owner and I'm going to tell everybody what to do. It's more of like, hey, we're a team here. Whoever has ideas and wants to do something, let me know and we'll figure out how to make it happen. And make sure that it works out the best way so that we all kind of have our hand in that and that it works out well for all of us.
I don't know why this idea keeps bouncing around my head just for different things, but like what would be the anatomy of a good feedback session? Like if we like for instance, look, we have the anatomy of a class, right? So I got a whiteboard brief, got a general warm-up, got a specific warm-up, got the workout, got a cool down. If we could try to come up with the anatomy of a debrief for a class, a lecture, like what else, like where would you start?
For me, I think there's two things that need to happen in that. I guess maybe you can call it three. Number one, I want it to be an open dialogue on what's going on. And so, the way that I've found valuable in starting that is asking questions. How'd you feel about this? Number two, it needs to be specific to one or two things. And then number three, whatever that feedback is needs to be actionable. I mean, I could watch a 60-minute class and I could point out 5 good or bad things about every piece of the class, the general warm-up, each piece of the specific warm-up, what happened in the workout, the cool down, the time management, your presence and attitude. But if you get to the end of the session and I've got, say there's 6 categories that I'm evaluating and I've got 5 good things and 5 bad things, I got 60 things to talk about. That's not productive for anybody.
No.
So if you can look at it, you can start a dialogue about, hey, well, how'd you feel about this thing? See if you can get them to lead you down the tunnel where either they felt uncomfortable or they're somewhere they're working with, and then you can isolate that into one big ticket item, maybe 2, and then give them some actionable steps that they can take to improve upon that thing. Easy day. That's what you want, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of jotting down some notes here on my desk as you're going through this because I'm trying to frame this in my mind, so that it's consistent. And like if you're going to be giving feedback or you want to start giving feedback, you probably have to have a template and then you want it to be consistent as you go through it. And so I guess if you were to if we were to have some framework for it, the feedback, and this is kind of what we do this is exactly what we do with level 2, but the feedback should fall into one of those 6 buckets, right? Of the 6 criteria. So teaching, seeing, correcting, presence and attitude, group management, demonstration. So as you're writing feedback, largely if it doesn't fall in one of those 6, I would table it, right? Just like put it off to the side and probably not even discuss it at all. Because it probably falls in that stylistic bucket where you're just like, hey, I just don't like the way you did that. And it's like, well, that's your opinion, with Todd Whitman. He's like, leave your opinion out of it, bro. It doesn't matter. So that's how the feedback go. But I wrote down 4 things here. So if I was to give the anatomy, probably where I would start would be self-assessment. Tell me what you think. If you could run it back right now, would you be happy with it? Would you change something? Like, where would you go? And this is something I think kind of Chuck really kind of probably taught me this a while back, just to see if they're self-aware. And then you'll also get an idea of like where you might be able to dig in based on where they lead the conversation now, because you can go a couple different ways there. So I would probably start with a self-assessment, and then I would probably go to what went well. Then I would follow that up with what could be better. And then I would probably end with when this is the most important part, which you alluded to earlier, what's the action plan? So self-assessment, is this person self-aware? Is their own personal feedback accurate, or does it align with what we saw? Highlight what went well, what could we improve, and then what's the action plan for improvement, right? So it's not just like, hey, you suck, figure it out, get better, but like we should be giving them the tools to improve that. So like I really try to avoid like any sort of like negative or critical feedback that doesn't involve at least my variation of an answer to that problem.
Right. There's like, what's the issue? If you can't pinpoint how to make it better, then what are you
Are you
talking
giving
about?
feedback? Yeah. Why
That's
even bring
like
it
you
up?
said with your opinion. It's like, well, I don't really care if you just didn't like the way that I dressed today, you know, or whatever it is. It's like, that's not feedback, right? So yeah, I'm with you on that.
So I think that's probably what I would do is like self-assessments. What are the positives? What are the negatives? And then the action plan. And then, you know, like you brought it up earlier, I even start to think that 3 is too many these days.
Yeah, it's 1 to 2 in my opinion.
You know, it's just like 1 to 2, and here's how I want you to do it.
Yep.
You know, and then iron that out from there. And I find that to be super, super beneficial. But it does. What are some tactics that you use for people who are immediately? So this probably doesn't happen as much as with your coaching staff, but it still happens at level 2s, right? You can tell somebody's not digging feedback. They're not interested.
Yeah, it has to.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So one of the things I do is, so Todd is, I think he had somebody walk in his office, but like one of the things I'll do is, if you can tell somebody's going to be resistant to feedback, that where we started with that anatomy piece right there with the self-assessment stuff, that is like a real quick way to potentially get past that. And then the second piece is like going with the positive. So what's their self-assessment? If there's positives and they outline those positives, agree with them, and now we're on the same team. And I think I might have brought this up earlier, is like try to avoid using the word you. Try to use us, we, or I. And that way it's not combative in nature. Because the second, I think I read this in like a relationship book, I think. If when I introduce the term you, now it becomes somewhat of a competition, and the people can be a little bit combative about that because now it feels like a personal attack. So if you can, you try to practice not using the word you when you give feedback. And I'm pretty sure I have talked about this before. That being said, you're going to have to practice this like quite a bit. You're going to have to do like a fake assessment on somebody, and then practice giving feedback to somebody without using the term you, because that can be incredibly challenging. I think everybody's going to be shocked how frequently we all use that term, and it can be the factor that makes a feedback session go completely down the drain. So that can be super challenging to deal with. But with practice, I think it also kind of helps you develop a little bit of empathy. And then the other thing is predetermine, like as you're writing down feedback, make it objective so that it doesn't feel like that you're attacking them. And one of the things that I can actually help on this, and I meant to write this down earlier, but is that one of the huge components that will make a feedback session go much more smoothly is the criteria for success should be predetermined. So it shouldn't be just random. For instance, if I'm going to give some feedback, the person who I'm giving feedback on should already know what the scorecard says. And then all of my feedback is going to be pulled or based on what the scorecard says. This is probably the easiest way to avoid combative interactions when giving feedback. Here's a scorecard. Let me explain to you what all of this means. Here's how we're going to grade success or failure, however you want to describe it. That way they know beforehand. So this is how you get them to self-assess correct. You give them the scorecard prior to, And then from there, as they're going through the scorecard they have in their mind, now they can go through and they can do this accurately. They're probably going to give you something that falls in line with what the feedback that you had is. And then you can start going through positives, negatives, and this is where you can start to bat this around and maybe have conversations revolving around that rather than just giving them the feedback. The conversations generally happen with somebody who's a little bit more seasoned, who probably already has an idea of how they would change those things. Some of the more kind of direct ideas were like, hey, you're going to need to do this, because they just don't have enough time or reps underneath their belt to correct that, would probably be a little bit easier. So for my newer coaches. So those are just some ideas. I hope that stuff helps. Just because as we're kind of getting back into the flow of it, we've introduced like a much more frequent feedback basis for our coaching staff here at CrossFit Rife, and then getting back into the swing of it with level 2s and level 1s for seminars. The feedback loop is starting to kick in pretty hot and heavies here. So again, I hope this helps for you guys. Remember, basically, all the feedback should fall within the 6 criteria. And then remember, the anatomy, and this is what we literally just made up on the fly, would look like self-assessment. What's positive? What went well? In other words, what were the things that could be better? Right? AKA in parentheses, what was the negative? And then what are your solutions to help them with, whether you give them the direct solutions or whether that's a conversation about what a potential solution to that could be. And if you can loop in there the, using us, we, I, rather than you, that's ideal. And make sure that they get the score sheet beforehand. So that's it, kind of giving and getting feedback. So if you are the one getting feedback and none of these things are in place, maybe you propose something that looks like this when you get the feedback, and that way it can be a little bit more productive. If you are giving the feedback and you don't have anything in place, hopefully this is a template that'll help you out. And I think what you'll find either way is that the progression, towards better will happen at a much faster clip moving forward. So I hope this helps. If you guys have other questions about this specifically or anything else, hit us up, and we'll see you next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. How cool is that? There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, so it becomes super simple. Some of these episodes with Fern or Todd or myself chatting with one another, we've done right within the app itself. Anchor will make it easy to distribute your podcast to all platforms, Spotify, Apple, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make an awesome podcast in one place. All you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Thanks again for listening to Best Hour of Their Day. If you haven't already, do us a favor, head over to the Apple Podcast app and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback for either Fern or myself, hit us up, besthouroftheirday@gmail.com, or send us a DM over on Instagram at Best Hour of Their Day. Once again, we couldn't do this without the amazing community, and you are a part of it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting Best Hour of Their Day.